in 2 minutes. Madam, good evening. Thatte, madam.
Good evening, Padmaja.
Yes, ma'am.
I just put my video on.
Yes,
Good evening, Dr. Urmila Thatte. Dr.M.V.L.Kothari here.
Good evening, ma'am.
Hi.
How nice of you to join.
Yes, and hello, Dr. Nitya.
Good evening, madam. So nice to see you.
My day is made. I'm joining to look at all of you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
And of course, and get lots of pearls of wisdom.
I doubt I can give you pearls of wisdom.
नाही बऱ्याच का दोघी परवा
All well, madam. All well with all of
परवा
us.
नित्या तुझी आठवण काढली. Yeah. So I think I'm they're all waiting for the lecture to start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a minute or so more. Yeah.
Just half a minute or so.
Good evening to Lopa ji. Good evening.
Good evening.
Badal, we are starting.
Yes, ma'am.
So, good evening, everybody. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the 9th oration of the M.V.L.K. chair. This is a very special occasion and very close to our hearts. Actually, what happens is we are also celebrating our foundation day today, KEM Foundation Day today. In the daytime, we have had lots of festivities, etc. And this is the culmination of the whole program. So I would like to take you through a very small visual tour of the principles on which our medical humanities department is division is based. Badal. So, Dr. Nitya will be formally introducing Thatte Madam, but I would also like to say here that it has been through Thatte Madam, Lopa Madam, Supe Sir, everybody's combined ideas and vision that medical humanities division has taken form, and it has from 2016 till date, and Dr. Sunil Pandya has been our chair, and I think hand over to Nitya now for further proceedings.
Thank you, Padmaja Madam, and good evening to everybody. Good evening, one and all. Like Madam Padmaja said earlier, it's indeed a very, very special moment for us. 22nd of January is our foundation day, and today is the 23rd, and this is the 9th foundation day of the V.L.Kothari Sir's chair. It's indeed an honor and privilege for me to introduce somebody whom I'm really, really fond of. Yeah, but I'll make a formal introduction before I say something else. Madam Urmila Thatte has previously held the position of the head of Department of Clinical Pharmacology at the CGS Medical College, and she's currently emeritus professor at our department. Madam's name in India is synonymous with ethics, actually. She served on ethics committees of KEM Hospital, Bombay Hospital, as well as the independent ethics committees in Mumbai, and is also the secretary of the Forum for Ethics Review Committees in India. She, along with Dr. Vasanta, Dr. Nandini, has actually shaped the way we understand ethics in our country today. She's contributed to the ICMR guidelines. Madam has over 300 publications, several books to her credit, and for the past 2 years consecutively, Madam was awarded as among the top 2% scientists in the world, based on a complex C-score calculation by the Stanford University. We got along very well, I remember, Madam. I miss you every single day every single day when I wake up. I know that you're not there, but I know you're there for me always. I miss your guiding presence, but I'm really, really looking forward to hearing you speak today at this 9th Foundation Day Chair Oration on investigator sites and their importance in clinical research. Over to you, Madam. An honor and privilege again. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Nitya, for a very kind introduction. And I'm equally fond of you, as you know. So I think it's important that we go straight into the oration so that we don't waste too much time. Let me share my slides with you all. Okay, can you see this?
Yes, Madam, please go ahead.
I would like to dedicate my talk today to Gertrude Elion, who was born today in 1918 and who was the pharmacologist who revolutionized the development of new pharmaceuticals in the field of medicine. And she was the one who was responsible for developing the first immunosuppressive drug and the first successful antiviral drug, and acyclovir. So kudos to her. And I thought it would be relevant to dedicate this talk to her, because this is where research begins. And if we do clinical research in an ethical way, then only we can do it in a correct way. So let me share with you my thoughts on how to 1 minute. I'm just trying to get rid of this. I can't get rid of it, I think. Okay. What I'm going to talk on is how an investigator site, the where the research is done, is responsible for the ethics of the conduct of the clinical trial. And it's very important that we all understand it, because I think there must be a lot of students here also who are listening to this talk. And this is directed at them, actually, because I presume most of the people the seniors who are attending will probably know everything over here. What I have based my whole talk on the good clinical practices, and this whole talk is directed towards identifying the essential need to what is the investigator's role in conducting the clinical trial. So the first thing is that the investigator should be qualified by education, training, and experience so that he or she can take the responsibility. Not only that, the investigator should be familiar thoroughly with the appropriate use of the investigational product and the protocol and everything about the protocol in the clinical research, the trial that you're going to do. It's very important that the investigator, is aware of the applicable regulatory requirements and good clinical practices. In fact, ethics committees now insist that all investigators have to be trained in GCP. It's very important for us to understand the importance of the institution as well. The institution plays an important role. It is not the investigator who does it just as an individual. The investigator has to be doing this research as part of the institution. And therefore, the institution bears an equal responsibility. And this institution should permit monitoring and auditing by the sponsor. Now, the reason why you do this is that no individual can do the whole study alone. You always have to have a team. So you have to have qualified people. They have to be also qualified, to whom you can delegate certain trial-related duties. And the person has to keep the list of trial-related duties with the investigator. Now, when the person has to also have adequate resources. The individual, whoever's the investigator, is selected by the sponsor based on the abilities that he has shown in the past about his capability of doing the research study. That means he should have a potential for recruiting the number of subjects, participants. Most importantly, the investigator should have sufficient time and should have adequate qualified staff and facilities. If you're doing a phase 1 study, for example, you need to have a proper phase 1 unit, which is why we set up in our department a good phase 1 unit, which had all the facilities to conduct a phase 1 study that we need to do. Which phase 1 is a very difficult study to do. In fact, it is something where you're giving the drug for the first time in human beings. And you have to do these studies. And we've done a number of COVID vaccine studies, which have helped, I think, along the way. So the investigator should be informed about the protocol. Remember this, because the most important thing is that the investigator should be at least aware of the protocol. Many a time I've seen that investigators themselves are not familiar with the protocol. They are not very familiar with the protocol, but they need to know it almost by heart. They should be able to understand what has to be done in the protocol before they can do the study. You can delegate, but you cannot relegate. The importance, the difference in the D and the R. You can delegate. You can give some responsibilities to other team members, but you cannot relegate that responsibility. And the investigator remains, very importantly, part of the the most important responsible person in the study. Medical care is always relevant. Medical care has to be done by a qualified physician or a dentist, because that is who are also allowed to conduct clinical research, who has to be an investigator or a sub-investigator for the study. Adequate medical care should be provided for the participant, especially during any adverse events. Now, the subject, the participant, does not have to give reasons for withdrawing prematurely, but as an investigator, you should try to find out if the participant has withdrawn from the study, why has he withdrawn from the study? You should make an attempt to find that out. Now, most important is that you have to have an ethics committee approval of the study. Prior to starting the study, this has to be a written dated approval or favorable opinion given by the IRB or IC, whatever is the word, for all the documents, trial protocol, written informed consent, all consent form updates, subject recruitment procedures, including advertisements, etc. The study should be conducted in compliance with the protocol agreed on by the sponsor or by the regulatory approval and by the ethics committee. Remember this, the protocol should be followed with. Now, if any deviation has to occur in the protocol, remember one thing, if any deviation has to occur, it has to be with prior approval of the ethics committee. I'll give you an example. We had one study which we were doing in the intensive care unit. And I remember that there was a patient who was 16 years old. And we had not got permission to do studies below 18 years old. So we took permission from the ethics committee to include this patient because it benefited that patient to get the medicine that we were trying. We were doing pharmacokinetic studies, and we gave that drug to that patient, and the ethics committee approved this protocol amendment, I should say. And only after we got ethics committee permission, we did this, we took this responsibility. Now, the responsibility for the investigational product rests with the investigator also. So I think, according to me, everywhere you will see that it all rests with the investigator. Where allowed, the investigator should assign some or all of the responsibilities for accountant to a pharmacist. You can give this responsibility to a pharmacist. We've often employed pharmacists to allow us to do this. But it is important that they use the IP only according to the approved protocol, and they should explain. Now, it is not the pharmacist who explains, but unless there is some special pharmaceutical requirement, the investigator will explain, or the delegated person delegated by the investigator will explain how the drug should be taken. Also, that has to be done. Now, randomization procedures and unblinding. It's important that the code should not be broken unless there is requirement based on the protocol. Always the protocol describes why unblinding should be done. So unless it is described why unblinding needs to be done, you don't need to do it. If by mistake accidental unblinding happens or unblinding due to serious adverse event occurs, then you must inform to the sponsor and follow what they say, what should be done. The most important requirement, according to me, in the ethical conduct of a clinical research is the informed consent document. And in obtaining informed consent, the participant should be given all the information possible. We need to follow the ethical principles that have their origin in Declaration of Helsinki. And first of all, we need to have approval of the written informed consent document, which all participants must sign before they take part in the study. All this must be revised whenever any new information comes up that makes new versions happen. And importantly, remember, the people that you delegate with this job to also must make sure that they are doing the correct version. Because I remember once we had this problem where the wrong version was used, and we went through a lot of problems because the wrong version was used. It was not a very old version. It was one of the just changed version that was used, but it is still not the correct version. So it creates a lot of problems and it makes for a lot of changes. Never coerce or unduly influence a participant to take part in the study. And the language has to be very simple, non-technical language. You should always inform the participant as much as possible information and use it in, orally, which can be explained to the participant. Now, the only thing is that if the person is illiterate, completely illiterate, then you have to use an impartial witness wherever applicable. Illiterate meaning cannot read or write. They can still sign. Many of the patients that we find sign, but they cannot, they know how to sign because they've learned it in their banking needs, but they are not able to read or write or not understand the language. You must give enough time to the participant to decide whether or not to take part in the study. Remember this, adequate time should be given. And we have had this complaint given to us by the ethics committee at times, where they felt that we did not give adequate time to the patient, to the participant to decide whether to participate or not. It should be signed by the participant, the participant's legally accepted representative, and by the person who conducted the informed consent. So the doctor has to sign, the patient or the patient's LAR has to sign. And in the case of illiterate participant, the impartial witness has to sign. The important thing is that the participant should be always given the copy which is signed and dated of that written informed consent form. If there is a non-therapeutic trial meaning where there is potentially no benefit to the participant, That means there is no treatment being given to the participant. Like the phase 1 studies that we do, vaccine studies. We didn't know whether the vaccines would work or not, but we had to do those studies. So over here, only literate people can participate. They should be conducted only in people who can give themselves the consent and who can sign and date the consent form. Nobody else should do it. Nobody else should do it for them. Progress reports have to be given to the ethics committee, depending upon how often, either definitely annually, but it can be, they may request it more often. For example, I remember we were doing a phase 1 study of a monoclonal antibody, and we have been asked to give 3 monthly report on this agent. Now, all serious adverse events have to be reported immediately to the sponsor and to other ethics committee and a regulatory authority. Other adverse events also have to be reported, but they can be reported at other times, not immediately. I'm sorry, did I say something wrong? I heard somebody say something.
No, madam, please go ahead.
On the trial need to be informed. Remember this. And of course, all the other people have to also be informed. And the final report should be written by the investigator after completing the trial. So you can understand that it is a lot of responsibility, and it is the complete responsibility of the principal investigator to ensure the ethical conduct of the clinical trial. And I leave you with my favorite photograph and this statement that relativity applies to physics, not ethics. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much for a very, very crisp, clear, focused. I always call it your ABC lectures, no? Accuracy, brevity, and clarity. Very, very nice. Traditionally, we don't have questions in orations, but if there are a couple, we have time. You could type them in the chat box, or you could put up your hands and I will just read them out. We have 34 participants, madam, online. Is there any question?
No, I don't.
Plus there is YouTube live, so many people.
Yes. Sure. Madam, if I were to ask you just one question, I mean, you mentioned a lot of attributes, which the investigator needs to have, the site needs to have, the team, responsibility of safety, monitoring, protocol deviations, so on and so forth. If there is one attribute which you think would be the most important, what would it be?
For the investigator.
Investigator site. I mean, like a take-home message. I mean, there are so many things that you covered.
I think it's honesty.
Yeah.
To be honest, and everybody in the team has to be honest. And I would give that the most important attribute.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, one lie is often covered up with another lie and then goes on and on. It's better to be honest, and then including when you make errors. It's always, better to own up. Yeah.
What is the word? When we first start deceiving, you end up in creating a huge web of lies.
Yeah. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when we first practice to deceive.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the word. That's the
Yeah,
sentence
yeah.
that I'm trying to find. Yeah.
And Dr. Nitya, madam, may I ask a question?
Absolutely. Fatke, madam, please go ahead, please.
Dr. Urmila, that was a wonderful lecture.
Thank you,
Excellently told. I learned a lot of new things on clinical trial. I have a very small question, even as an administrator. How much of remuneration can the investigator be allowed to take so that there is no conflict of interest?
I don't know if there is any figure written in any type of guideline.
That's why I
figure
want
has
your
been defined.
opinion.
No, there is no. It should be commensurate with the type of study, the risks that the participants are taking, because they will have to be compensated for the risks, and whatever effort the investigator is taking. So I don't think numbers can be put.
The question will be, I'll make it a little more specific. Would the investigator be under some obligation if he is given a large remuneration, say on a vaccine trial, and we have, the vaccine is just 60% efficacy versus whatever, and then will the investigator feel under obligation that he has to give a good report when it is a vaccine trial? And for a vaccine trial, even one serious adverse event or one death in a healthy child, particularly I'm talking of childhood vaccines, means a lot. So in that case, would you say that the investigator should have dash, dash, dash of remuneration, say less than 1%
Less than 1% of what?
of the total remuneration that you get for a trial? Say the medical college gets 10 lakhs.
Yeah, in medical school, nobody gets personally remunerated. They don't get as an individual, you don't get remunerated. You get remunerated, the institution gets remunerated.
Yes,
So
what about?
But when there are private institutions, private organizations, or even consultants used to do these trials. And yes, I wonder, I haven't a clue, because there is no guideline that gives you a number, a value, that so much should be taken and so much should not be taken. I'm sorry, I cannot answer that question.
Would you like to take it up with the ethics committee, wherever you are on so many ethics committees?
Yes, one needs to take it up with the ethics committee. That is what, in fact, many times investigators do not like it when the ethics committee asks, how much are you getting remunerated? They don't like it. Investigators don't like it, but nobody has joined an ethics committee to become popular. You join an ethics committee because you have to do your job.
Wonderfully said, Urmila madam. Thank you so much.
Nitya?
Yes, ma'am. Are there any other questions? Yeah, there is one.
May I ask?
Yes, ma'am. Lopa, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead. Yeah.
I have a very basic question. What are the criteria the principal investigator should follow in order to accept a trial?
He should have all these things that I mentioned, ma'am. He should have adequate resources in terms of patients, in terms of...
No, I don't mean in that sense. What are the points he should say whether this project is worth doing or not?
Worth doing or not? It is those principles that you follow when you accept a research. Is it going to be socially acceptable? Is it going to be is it going to help any participant? Like, for example, we mostly do in our department, we mostly do phase 1 studies. They're not going to help anybody. But we did take up a lot of these phase 1 studies for the COVID vaccines because we thought that it would help the participants in, if you gave those vaccines, it would help them to generate an immunity. So we always think of it from that point of view. So will it help the participant at all to in order, I mean, is it socially accepted, socially useful?
Even what about the risk involved? How much risk do you take?
You have to do a risk benefit analysis. You also personally, as an investigator, have to do a risk benefit analysis. How much is it going to benefit versus how much is the risk? It will always have to be balanced. The ethics committee will also do that risk benefit analysis. They also run some kind of a risk benefit analysis to assess whether this risk is worth taking or not. So you have a third party who also assesses this. So yes, ma'am, the risk is always assessed and it always has to be with beneficence. The 3 principles that were told in the Belmont report is that beneficence, what is that?
Autonomy, beneficence.
Autonomy and respect for the participant. So all these 3 things have to be maintained.
Thank you.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions, madam, in the chat box. The first one is morbid. What happens if the PI dies? Who continues the trials?
You always have a second, usually you have to have a, what do you call it?
A co-PI or a sub-investigator.
Co-investigator or a sub-investigator who takes over. And it is the responsibility of the institution to ensure that this continues in a proper way, without interruption.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, madam mentioned the team, no? So the team will continue with The second one is, if we are changing the study settings, as in the place at which the research is being conducted is changed, in such a situation, do you inform the ethics committee?
Yes, you inform the ethics committee, you over-inform the ethics committee. It's always better to over-inform the ethics committee because they should know if your site is, I didn't understand the settings are being changed, meaning that
I'll just give you an example. I'm just wondering, supposing you're doing a study in the hospital and then you want to take the study to the community, maybe because you're not getting adequate patients in the hospital. So would you inform the ethics committee that you're moving? Yeah.
Because it will be a change in the environment. It will change the way you are recruiting participants also. So you have to inform the ethics committee. Yes.
Thank you, madam. Any further questions? Anybody from the YouTube?
Dr. Nitya, can I ask one question?
Please, please. I can see Madam Nikhil is online. Yeah.
I can see. I saw that.
Yeah. Madam, please go ahead with your question.
Madam, will the same rules apply for our students' dissertations and all also?
All the rules are the same. Ethics is always same. It doesn't matter if it is a dissertation or it is a regulatory claim.
Because as Dr. Nitya said, we are not getting enough participants here. So
remember the last statement that I said, relativity is for physics. It is not for ethics. So the participants are similar. You have to follow the same rules.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other questions? There's one more, I think. No. Yeah, if there are no further questions, there's nothing in the chat and I don't see anything from the YouTube as well. I would just like to thank Thatte madam for a most wonderful presentation. And I think very nice questions were asked at the end. I mean,
Yeah, I think I
Very,
enjoyed.
very nice. Yeah, very different kind of questions and possibly practical questions as well, because these are things that people face, on a day-to-day basis. Let me, madam, do the honors and now share the screen with you, with all of you. Yeah. This, madam, is the plaque for you.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yes, let me just read it out for those of you who may not be able to see. This is the plaque given to Thatte madam on the 9th foundation day of the chair oration for Dr. Urmila Thatte, who's delivered a fantastic talk on importance of the investigator, the site, the team in the ethical conduct of research. This is given to madam by the Dr.M.V.L.Kothari chair and the Division of Medical Humanities, St. G.S. Medical College and KEM, madam, and it is signed by Dr. Padmaja, the coordinator, Dr. Sunil Pandya, the chairperson, Dr. Pathak, our academic dean, and Dr. Rawat, who's our dean. Most
you very
wonderful. Yeah, we'll see to it that it is delivered to you, madam. But
Thank you.
yeah, really, really nice, hearing you speak. Yeah, I'll stop sharing the screen now.
It's an honor.
Yeah. And you've got a lot of thanks in the chat box. Thank you for a very informative session. Thank you, madam, and so forth.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I now hand over the
I
mic.
would also like to thank Lopa madam for this honor. And I should have started that way, but I still thank you, ma'am.
I'll
And
just
for
hand it over now to Dr. Padmaja for the vote of thanks. Yeah.
May I just say, Dr.
Yes, ma'am.
Thatte,
Yeah.
Urmila, you had inspired the whole this movement of establishing a chair. So you richly, and you have allowed it to grow. So inspire it to grow. So you deserve all the credit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Over to you, Dr. Padmaja. Yeah.
Thank you. So I have this pleasant task of giving the vote of thanks. Thank you, Thatte madam. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and talking to us. I thank our Dean, Dr. Sangeeta Rawat, for being there with us always and inspiring us to do various programs. Thanks and the gratitude goes to Dr. Sunil Pandya, sir, who has always been a guiding light for us. Lopa madam, who is, though she guides, but she works in a very, her style is very unique, without her, this division wouldn't have survived. So thank you, Lopa madam. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Nitya, for conducting today's session. And I thank all the participants. I thank Badal particularly, who has been always supportive, our technical team. And thank you all very much. And have a very good night.
Thank you so much. Thank you.